Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. Shall we start with the good or the bad? So well written. This is the kind of book where you really feel like the author knows what they want. They know what they're doing. They know what the goal of their book is. The fiction list is disappointing me so much. This book is giving me nothing. Very interesting information. So far, non-fiction list, absolute excellence. Fiction list, I don't understand what's happening here. Reading a book about Dutch culture and Dutch art, and especially how incredibly romanticized it is a bit weird. It wasn't... I'm enjoying the plot heavy books more than the more literary books. I want to finish this vlog and I cannot decide. Hi, I'm Milena and welcome to my channel and welcome to the Women's Prize vlog. I'm going to read the short list of both the non-fiction Women Prize and the fiction Women Prize. I've done some reading already, so I hope that I can finish the short list in time. Today is the 12th of May and the winners will be announced on the 13th of June. I have 1 month to finish the books that I've not read yet. Let's start with the non-fiction prize. I have finished 2 already, so that's great. I finished A Flat Place by Noreen Massoud, which I gave 4 stars, and I have finished How to Say Babylon, which I gave 5 stars. And I'm currently reading Codependent, which I'm really enjoying, even though it's quite a tough read. Another book that I own that's on the list is Thunderclap by Laura Cumming. This is a historical non-fiction that I'm really looking forward to because it's the only book I've seen a lot of people review. All That She Carried is the one I've heard mixed reviews about. The themes really interest me. The last one is Doppelganger, but I'm not sure I will read it because I don't know if I have the mental space to be able to read a book like that, because I've heard a lot of people say that's incredibly dense. For the fiction list, I have read Enter Ghost, which I gave 3 stars. I have 3 more books that I actually own. One is one that I've heard nothing but bad reviews about, but it really seems like my kind of book because it's historical fiction. That is Restless, Dolly, Maunder. Brotherless Night, which I read the first chapter of, but I was in such a reading slump that I put it away again. Right now I'm halfway through Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. I'm loving the writing of this one, even though thematically it's not really my kind of book. I'm gonna talk about this book first because I think I will finish it quite soon. The other books on the shortlist I'm going to listen to on audio. The first 2 books I think we'll discuss is this one and Codependent, and then hopefully I can do it all before the 13th of June, and I'll predict at the end of this vlog who I think will win the Women's Prize, both for fiction and non-fiction. So let's go! I just finished my first book for this vlog, and that is Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. I gave this, or I ended up giving this 4 stars. It's an interesting one. Definitely, like I said, I like the writings. In this book we follow a mother and her toddler. I think he's a little bit younger. Earlier in the novel, it's the experience of the extreme isolation that she experiences with her child. Constant exhaustion with really mentally living in the world of raising a child. And she mainly does it on her own because her husband has a full-time job and he's not very involved. Or so it is from her perspective. It's really interesting because we really experience that bubble that she is experiencing as well. As a narrator, she's very, very unreliable, and that is quite enjoyable to read. I will have to say, not being a mother myself, not having this experience, I think if you have this experience, then reading it will be very different. For me, I was reading this as an outsider, enjoying the writing and enjoying the way that the author played with the concept, and not really being able to reference it to real life experience, because it's really such an isolated, unique personal experience that is described in this book. The mom in this book calls her son a soldier sailor, and later is referenced to a Walt Whitman poem. It is about loss and grief, and I'm not a poetry or Walt Whitman expert, so I cannot tell you exactly what it all means. I think that the core of this book is really about loss and grief that comes with motherhood, both in the way that you lose a certain amount of freedom, but also what you lose when your child grows up. Those two really have an interesting outcome in this book. I felt a constant feeling of dread throughout this book. Once the mother kind of leaves her isolation, so do we, and we get a clearer view of the actual factual events. For me, it was just like a solid 4 star. It was a good book, but it's not really something I will really remember or that was really incredibly special special to me. Personally, this would not be really a kind of Women's Prize winner for me, but I do get why it's on the shortlist, and I think maybe it could win. I of course have so many left to read of the shortlist. I am a little bit further into Codependent, and that one keeps on surprising me because right now I read a chapter about policing in Amsterdam and certain regulations that to me felt strangely enough normal because they were literally in my textbooks explained as police policy, and seeing someone so clever and intelligent research it in a book was really interesting to me to see a perspective about an aspect of my own culture. I'm gonna keep on listening to that one, and right now I think I want something a little bit lighter, so reading this, I know this is a really tough read, so I'm going to go for the historical fiction as hopefully a bit of a palate cleanser. I also have quite low expectations for that one because no one seems to really love it, so hopefully it will just be an easy quick read and then I will get cracking on this one. Oh dear. Oh dear, oh dear. Shall we start with the good or the bad? I want to say let's start with the good. First of all, I revamped my workspace, which I'm loving, by the way. It's not finished yet, but I have 3 shelves like that right now. I'm really enjoying it. I finished Codependent and I really liked it, or I thought it was really good. Liking it is a weird thing to say. Codependent is about how we are dependent on IA and not in a scary Silicon Valley evil plans kind of way, which is what I was afraid of, which is the reason why I didn't really feel like reading this. But this is very much about the social, economic, gender, race part of IA, about how it is created and how it uses human labor to exist and to develop all the complications that we see within that. Because a lot of people who work on IA are people who work in developing countries, so they don't really get the minimum wage that, for example, you would get in Europe or the US. Well, those are the corporations and the people that profit from it. And it's also about how government and police uses IA to profile people, and you have that in different degrees. This book talks about how it affects especially people who enjoy less privilege in life overall, and how IA can actually enlarge that. She says it much better than I can, but I found it really interesting, and I found that it's the kind of book that anyone should just give a go. I don't really say that very often because everyone is different, everyone needs different things in their lives, but I feel like this is a part of our current world that is going so fast and that a lot of people are not understanding. I, for example, didn't realize how difficult it is to make laws that apply to digital things. Digital is worldwide and laws are not. So that's really interesting, and especially how it's so incredibly necessary that we get better laws that are about digital items and digital things, because a lot of it falls through the cracks. So yes, it's definitely one I would recommend. I do think you can notice that it's written by a journalist, which of course is a good thing because you get all the right information, but I also felt like every chapter was just a really big piece of journalism, and how it all tied together wasn't maybe its strongest part of the book. Because of that, it's not necessarily going to be my winner because it didn't feel as much as a compacted book as the other things I've read so far. Next up, I think I'm going to listen to the audiobook of All That She Carried. I saw a wonderful video series by Louise Savage, who read all of the long list for the nonfiction, and she recommended to skip the introduction of this book because the introduction gives an overview of all that is in the book, which kind of takes away a lot. I'm going to skip the introduction and just listen to the book itself. And then the fiction list is disappointing me so much. The type of characters I really don't get on with, and I did watch a little bit more on the jury, and I do think they have things that they care about a lot that I don't necessarily identify with a lot. Dreaming big and motherhood, those are 2 topics that I don't feel a lot of connection with, so it makes sense that I don't like any of the main characters in the books that I've read so far. And the prize for least like character so far of the shortlist goes to the beautiful Dolly Maunder. This is set in Australia, and we follow Dolly, who is a farmer's daughter. She grows up, she wants more, she becomes a businesswoman, but it's about all the struggles of things you cannot do as a woman. I found her so annoying. Like, I can of course empathize with her troubles, but I think both the strong suits and the downfall of this book is that Dolly is incredibly normal. She is very everyday, there's nothing special about her life. And while I usually kind of love these daily life elements in books, especially historical fictions, which this is, Dolly is born at the end of the 19th century. I usually really love that. Just made for a boring read, because even if the circumstances are quite daily life, quite simple, Dolly was incredibly unlikable. And is based on the grandma of the author. I mentioned in this vlog, I think before, how I don't always get on with unlikable characters. This character is annoying, and she's annoying because she has a certain inability of growth, in a sense that she becomes bitter because of her experiences. She is petty, she is jealous, even of her children, and she is so incredibly one-sided, and there is not a hint of kindness in her. It's all about, I want this, I want that, it's all about what she wants, and it's all more, which of course is the restless part of it. In the beginning I was like, okay, so she is quite a distant, unkind, selfish mother, but I guess in a way all types of mothers are allowed to exist within the realm of women experiences, of female experiences. Is that what is happening here? I saw a Goodreads review of someone saying, only when you're related to this person would you think they're an interesting person. And while I found that a little bit harsh, I don't understand why this is on the shortlist. I mean, this is a book that has a place and time, a readership that will really enjoy it, but that readership is not the people who read the women's prize, especially not the shortlist. So I don't understand why this is on there. On the Women's Prize website it says that they want excellence, originality and accessibility. While this is a good read, it's accessible, and therefore I said like it has its readership, but it's neither excellent nor original, and all the other books are in a way. Like, why did I read this for the shortlist? I don't want to be mean, but this is just not the book that belongs on there. I did start listening to the wren, and already the narration has an original thing. It is accessible. Whether it's excellent, we're going to have to wait and see. It has a low Goodreads rating though, so I'm a little bit nervous, but I will update you very soon. So far, non-fiction list, absolute excellence. Fiction list, I don't understand what's happening here. Last year, loved almost everything. This year I have a 4-star and 2 3-stars. So the other 3 better be amazing, otherwise I might have a little bit of an identity crisis with my reading. Hi, I have finished the wren, and again I am so not convinced of the shortlist this year. I gave this 3.5 stars. This novel is set in Ireland. We follow multiple generations, mainly a mother and a daughter, as, to be honest, their lives are not very interesting. There is nothing that stands out about their lives. There's nothing incredibly unique that doesn't feel like every other character in every other book. I cannot really tell you what this book is about because I feel like it doesn't really have a plot. So characters and plot, this book is giving me nothing. The writing I found charming, especially the narration of the audiobook by the author as well. Somehow I really enjoyed that, and I don't always need a plot in my book, so I cannot really fault it for that. But maybe I do want some interesting characters, or if the writing is all that the book has, it needs to be incredibly spectacular. But because I did kind of like the writing and I did feel a certain connection while I was listening to it, I'm gonna give it a 3.5. This feels very forgettable. It really reminded me of Ellie Smith, of her seasonal quartet, which I have all read, and those are kind of 3 to 3.5 kind of reads for me. If you really love Ellie Smith, then I think maybe you'll really enjoy the wren, but it just didn't have any originality for me. The writing may have been excellent, but I didn't find it original, and I also did not find it accessible because it was really confusing at some parts. Once again, I'm disappointed with the shortlist. I have been reading Brotherless Night. I've almost finished that one. That might be a 5-star, and then I have only one more left. Brotherless Night will probably be my winner of the fiction list. Really nothing interesting to report. Just another disappointment from the Women's Prize for Fiction list. Hopefully the non-fiction list will keep on impressing me. Let's go for that. Hi, it is a very rainy Friday. I have not been doing a lot of reading, and I think partially that's because I've been reading Brotherless Night. Ooh, let's step into the light. I've been reading Brotherless Night, which is really good. I think it's gonna be a 5-star. But it's about the civil war in Sri Lanka. And I feel like reading about a civil war right now with everything that's going on in Palestine is quite difficult to read. Not saying it's not more important than it is difficult for me in this position to read. But the similarities are uncanny, and just the devastation of a civil war is horrendous. In this we follow a girl who wants to go to medical school, and she has 4 brothers, and we follow her through most of the 1980s as she eventually goes to medical school, as the Sri Lanka civil war develops, and we get the military groups of Tamils. Our main character is Tamil as well, who opposes the government, who has a lot of discrimination towards Tamils. So I'm almost finished. As you can see, it's just so good compared to the other fiction on the shortlist. This is very different thematically as well. Writing is very different. I just kind of feel like this is the kind of book I expect on a shortlist. His writing is both quite accessible, thematically it's original, and it's very excellent in the way that the book is written. So for me, so far, this is the only fiction book that actually does all the 3 things a Women Prize book is supposed to do. I've heard not great things about the other book I still need to read. That is River East, River West. I'm just gonna sit down and finish it. I have about 50 pages left. I did finish Brotherless Night, and yes, of course it's going to be a 5-star. So well written. This is the kind of book where you really feel like the author knows what they want. They know what they're doing. They know what the goal of their book is. I think that kind of was my issue with both Enter Ghost and Duran Duran. The goal of the book wasn't really clear, or shifted maybe throughout the book. I also liked how not everything is very directly told. There are a few, I would say, little mysteries for you to uncover yourself. For example, the narrator talks to the reader sometimes, and you start to wonder who the reader is, to whom the narrator is talking, because it's not me. Like, it's not me, the reader on the sofa, it's someone else. And I think I did discover it in the end. It's a heartbreaking book. It's a book full of mourning and loss and full of incredible determination. Yeah, I just think it's really, really good. I think the author is a really, really good writer. Even though this is about things that have really happened, it's definitely a novel, it's definitely fiction. For this year, it's the most relevant book I've read so far from the shortlist. I'm gonna make dinner now because I'm hungry, and it's already much later than I would usually have dinner, but I wanted to finish this. So I'm gonna make some dinner and cuddle my cats because they've been wanting attention. They really do. I mean, that is very inappropriate, Max. It is the 4th of June, which means I have 9 days left for the Women's Prize. I got a little bit derailed with my reading because one of our cats decided that she wanted to be an outdoor cat, and our cats are indoor cats. For 24 hours I experienced intense stress looking for her, and then in the middle of the night she decided she had had enough and she came home, and we heard one of our other cats banging on the door because he wanted to let her in, which is kind of really cute. We got up at 3 to let her in and feed her because she was very, very hungry because she hadn't eaten in 24 hours. She has been sleeping all day because she's very tired from her adventure, and I hope she remembers that the adventure wasn't very fun because there was no food involved. I didn't do a whole lot of reading, but I am in the middle of not the last 2, but of the 2 non-fiction books that I still want to read. First one I have downstairs, but that is Thunderclap. Almost think 100 pages into that book. It's not very far. This is a book, part biography about different Dutch 17th century painters, and kind of a memoir as well of the author with the Netherlands. And as someone who is from the Netherlands, reading a book about Dutch culture and Dutch art, and especially how incredibly romanticized it is a bit weird. It's a bit odd, especially when people write from a tourist perspective. The things they say about your country is just like the tourist version of it and not what it's actually like. I find that a little bit annoying maybe, but I do like the art parts. It's really fun because the book itself, I will put in some b-roll, feels like an art book. It also has the pictures, and I'm a very visual reader, so I love like reading a description of a painting while also being able to look at the painting. So I'm having a good time with that. It's a really nice book to just sit with, and I am enjoying reading it, but it's not gonna be a 5-star. The other book I'm reading is All That She Carries, and this surrounds a sack that an enslaved woman brought with her. It's a sack with stuff that her mother gave to her daughter when she had to leave. There is so little known about these people who did this, and of course that is kind of the point, I guess, of the book, that there's so little history known about individuals who were enslaved. But I feel like this book has a little bit too much filler, because there's a lot of information that I feel like most people who start reading this book already know. There was a lot of information about Harriet Jacobs that was kind of, I feel like, basic information that everyone knows. To add that in that book, just to give context to what the life of those women who owned the sack could have been like. I get it, but it doesn't really add a lot of value for me as a reader. And there's a lot of more general history. It's more filler than that it really adds to the context or the core of the book. I saw some reviews on Goodreads that had similar thoughts, and I'm, I think, a third of the way through that one. Doing a lot of non-fiction reading. I've been diving a little bit into Doppelganger, reading reviews about it and stuff. I really don't think it's a book I should read in a few days. I mean, it's interesting, but it's the kind of non-fiction that I know will take me like at least a month to finish. So yeah, I think it's doable to have 9 days and 3 books, 2 of which I've already started, and I'm a little bit of the way through already. So today, because yesterday was so unproductive, I have to do quite a bit of work for the bookshop. I have to ship 2 orders, and I am also getting sticky notes for the bookshop, because I feel like annotating classics is such a big part of loving and reading classics that I also wanted annotation supplies in the shop. I'm getting a lot of different sticky notes that I love using myself and that I prefer using myself. Those were shipped today from Germany, so those will be here in a few days. And I want to make some photos, of course, specifically for the shop, and make sure that all the information that is on the website is up to date. Those are all things that I still have to do. And of course there's many more things I have to do. I've also bought an SEO guide from another creator or small business owner who has a lot of great tips. So I've been working on that, which is a little bit mind-numbing because those are my least favorite things of the business, but it's so important to be able to be visible on Google if you have a web shop. So I gotta do it, but I don't feel like it. It's all part of it. It's all fine. I'll talk to you about one of the non-fiction books very soon. I have finished All That She Carried, and I just feel the same way as I did when I updated you before. I didn't really think this book did what it wanted to do. I find it hard to criticize a book that is about such an important topic and has such important information. As a book, I didn't think it was well written. There was very little information about what the book was actually about the sack, about the women's lives. I felt like I was reading a general history on slavery, which I think is a very valuable thing, but then you should probably just publish your book as a general history of slavery and not publish it as if it were a biography of these women. The things that the author was mentioning in general history did connect, but in a way that was just only speculating. Like, this could have happened to them, they could have encountered this, because the author was not able to find really anything fact-wise on these people. All was speculation. The context also didn't add a lot of value because it was a big what if. I think this book would have been better if the information was what the book was about, if you get what I mean, because right now it just felt like the author really wanted to write about these women and about this sack, but she just couldn't fill a book with the information that she got, so she just decided to add a lot of filler, and therefore I don't think the book really succeeded. But again, the filler in itself was very interesting information and valuable information, so I'm going to give it a 3.5. I think the author did a good job at telling the general history in a way that the author is not afraid to tell the truth and to really get into all the gruesome details, tell the story from the perspective it should be told from. So that I really appreciated. But I think the book and the way that it was published is not successful in itself. I'd be really, really surprised if this won the prize. I think it's the weakest book on the list so far. I'm still reading Thunderclap, which I am enjoying. It does feel a little underwhelming thematically towards the other books because, well, I like reading about art and it's very romantic and atmospheric. It also feels a bit random at parts where the author suddenly started talking about her father and about eyesight and how eyesight is experienced, and I don't really see how it ties together quite yet with the Dutch painters from the 17th century. Maybe it does to other people. Maybe I'm just not seeing it. There was one page about female painters, which was the most interesting page in the whole book so far. And I'm maybe a little bit disappointed that it's all about male painters. I understand that there's much more information available, but for a book that's on the Women's Prize list, I feel like a history about white men is not necessarily the kind of history I want to read. Getting a little bit critical of the non-fiction list, I am noticing that. I listened to about an hour of River East, River West when I was doing some housework this morning. It's interesting, it's intriguing so far. We meet the main character who's biracial and lives in China. I think her mom is American, her mom is white, and her mom marries a Chinese man. Right now we are set at their wedding and it's very clear that our main character, who's a teenager at this point, is not very pleased about the marriage. So that's a very intriguing start. I'm excited for this book for now. It is the 12th of June, so I have one day or maybe just a few hours, like just today left, to finish the reading goal of this vlog. And that is of course to read both shortlist. I've already given up finishing the entire shortlist for the non-fiction. As I mentioned before, I'm not gonna finish Doppelganger because that's just not a book I want to read in a short amount of time. But I do have only 50 pages left of Thunderclap, so I can definitely finish that today. I have read 5 of the 6 non-fiction lists, but good news! Because I have finished the fiction shortlist, and the last one I had to finish was River East, River West, and this was such a pleasant surprise. I liked this much more than I thought I would based on some mediocre reviews. A strange thing I've noticed in the shortlist so far is that I'm enjoying the plot-heavy books more than the more literary books. Usually for me it's the other way around. This book is quite plot heavy and there are some parts of the plot that I found predictable. I don't want to say far-fetched because they did make sense in the context of the book. Some plot points that had quite a shock factor were a bit predictable. They were handled well, they were written well, like it has a few content warnings, this book, but I could have done without them, and I think it may have even been a better book if the author had chosen to either not have those plot points in this book or to have written them in a more surprising way. So it was a little bit predictable at points, but it was incredibly readable. So this is definitely one of those very accessible literary fictions. I read this in 2 days and it was not a punishment at all. I had a great time. This has a dual timeline, so I mentioned the first timeline, but you also have the timeline of her stepdad, and I've seen a lot of people say that they prefer his timeline, but for me I didn't really have a strong preference. Maybe the fact that I did like Alpha's storyline is because she was the same age in the same year as I was. She was born in 1903, I am born in 1904, so a lot of her teenage angst and the context of society within that I recognized because I was a teenager the same age at the same time, which I don't think I've read before. I think right now I'm almost 30, so right now my generation is starting to write books and starting to write about their own teenage years, so it's kind of fun to see that in a book. Someone called this reverse immigration, and I don't know if that's the right term for it, but it was interesting to see Americans living in China and how Chinese people look at America and how the way Americans look at Chinese people affects them in the way that they sort of idolize the US, and I really liked how the ending used that. Overall, I just thought it was quite a good book. I'm going to give it 4 stars. I did have a bit of a slump, I think, in the middle because of what I mentioned before. Some predictability was in there and I didn't really care for that because I just knew what was going to happen. Once I finished Thunderclap, so for the non-fiction prize, I will give you a little bit of a ranking and a prediction of who I think will win. I will leave a comment on this video with my reaction to the winner because I think I want to upload this before the winner is announced. So for the rest of the day I'm going to try to do some reading. Thunderclap is not the kind of book you can read in big sittings. I started my day with reading about 15 pages and then I had to put it down again. Not because it's a tough subject matter, but just because it's very descriptive and it's very beautifully written, but it's that kind of non-fiction that you just dip in and out of, which I knew was going to be a challenge with the non-fiction list, is that you kind of have like those memoir non-fictions like A Flat Place and How to Say Babylon. Those are the kind of books you can read in big chunks, but then you have your All That She Carried, Thunderclap, Codependent. Those are books that you just need a longer time for. I do want to do this again next year, but then want to schedule my non-fiction reading a little bit better so that I could read all 6. Because if I had planned it better, I could have also read Doppelganger. But since I also started a business this year, 6 months ago, I feel like I should cut myself some slack in that department. Okay, I'll talk to you soon. Alright, it is much later in the day, it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon and I'm about to edit and upload this video because I finished Thunderclap. I don't really know what to make of this book, so let's just start with the positives. It really made me want to look at art. It also has a few beautiful pictures, many of them I knew of course because they're Dutch paintings. This is not my favorite, but it was one of my favorites. That I really liked, and it's also a lot about the goldfinch. I'm sure you know because of the film and the book by Donna Tartt. So that's a positive. I liked the discussions about art. It made me think about art. It was really lovely because I'm a very visual reader to also be able to look at the pictures. So if you would audiobook this, I would maybe also get a library edition if you can find it, to look at the pictures while you're listening. You will really miss out if you don't have the pictures to look at. But there were some beautiful sentences in here. I think the writing on a sentence level was very, very beautiful. An example is, our pictures can shore you up, remind you who you are and what you stand for. The relationship we have with them is so singular and unique that nobody can gainsay your experience. That is just a beautiful way to say something. And it's just a really nice book to hold. It's a really nice book to have. But the structure of this book was not my favorite. It felt a bit purposeless at times. There are memoir parts in this book that are about the author. She mentioned her father as well was also an artist who was an important part, or maybe in a way the whole reason she wrote this book. We have some parts about her daughter and just a few very short anecdotes about her own life. The memoir parts just felt a little bit awkward. It felt like they didn't belong in this book. That is coming from someone who loves memoir and research combined. I really, really love that. One of my favorites is a book by Nell Stevens about Elizabeth Gaskell, and I feel like she does it perfectly in this book. They're just these short anecdotes that vaguely connect to the material that Laura Cumming is talking about in a way that I just didn't feel like we got to know the author as a person at all. That is usually the added value of adding memoir parts to, for example, a history book. It didn't work for me. It was also not really a structure in the lives of the painters she discussed. We went all over the place with different events of different painters, and I just didn't really understand why the book was structured the way it was, because it kind of felt like it did not have a structure. That could be a me thing. Maybe I missed a certain thread, but then it's so subtle that I don't know if that kind of subtlety works for a non-fiction book. I'm still going to give it 4 stars because the positives may kind of outweigh the negatives for this. It's not really my kind of book, and I really expected that it would be. I thought I would really like this. Like, I talked about the romanticization of Dutch culture before, and as someone who is Dutch, it's a bit awkward because you see how not true it is. The Netherlands that the author sees is a Netherlands that at least it doesn't exist anymore, but it kind of feels like a type of country that has never existed, that she only sees through the paintings. I'm not saying that she doesn't acknowledge that, but it's still a bit icky for me. Yeah, I feel very dubious about this book, but because I can see how someone would really, really love this, I'm still gonna rate it a 4 star. Maybe it's a bit more closer to a 3, but I want to finish this vlog and I cannot decide. Now it's time to rank the books. Don't take this too seriously, but it's really fun to do, I think. So let's start with the non-fiction one. I didn't read Doppelganger, and on number 5 is for me All That She Carried, which I discussed in 2 clips back. The information was interesting. I didn't like it as a book. On number 4, Thunderclap, kind of for similar reasons. I like the art part of it, but the structure of the book didn't work for me. On number 3, A Flat Place, which I love the structure of that book actually, but I thought the memoir parts were not, I think, personal or deep enough, but that's also a personal choice of the author. So overall, I just really appreciated that book and found it quite a big achievement. 1 and 2 was difficult for me to decide because one book I found had information that is so important, and the other book I found written so amazingly. So I didn't know what I think is more important, so I just went with my rating. On number 2 is a 4.5, which is Codependent. This book is a must read. Like, I don't say that lightly, but I think this book is a must read. It contains a lot of important information about our time and probably about our future. And then on number 1, I think my only 5-star from this list, that is How to Say Babylon. This is one of the best memoirs I've ever read. Just everything about this book, it's just good. That's all I have to say about it. It's just a really good book. I do also think this one will win. I don't think it's just my number 1. I mean, I haven't read Doppelganger, so maybe that one is even better. So if that one wins, then I will read it still at some point. I won't have a comment on it, of course, but I think from what I've read that How to Say Babylon will win. So let's get into the fiction, which I think is a little bit more controversial, because I've seen other people rank things, and while a lot of people have the same number 1 as me, there are also a lot of people who really liked some books that I did not like. And yes, I was critical on the fiction list. I think this one is much weaker than last year's. I stand by the thing that I said, that this jury just doesn't really match with my reading taste. It's a lot about parenthood and it's a lot about very shitty people. 2 things that don't need to be in a book for me. I prefer it if it's not. On number 6 is the Restless Dolly Maunder for me. Again, this has its readership, but I don't think it's the Women's Prize readership. My number 5 is, I think, an unpopular opinion, and that is the wren, which I think I was so kind of done with this shortlist when I finished that, because to me, it wasn't... just the topics of this book. I could not care less about the topics in this book. And even in a way that I can't see the appeal of this book at all. I was bored for most of it. Then the only thing I did like was the writing and the flow of the book. For me, it was all vibes and nothing else. Very much a me thing, because other people did love this book, just I cannot see it. Like topic and character wise, like it did nothing for me. My number 4 is Enter Ghost by Isabella Hama, which I did not review for this vlog because I finished it before I started filming this vlog. I didn't really like Enter Ghost because I really disliked the character. I didn't like the theater parts, which was a really big part of the novel. It almost held the novel upright. I can acknowledge that it's done well. I thought the experimental writing was clever. The way that the book uses language, Arabic versus English, translating those 2 languages was all very clever. It's a clever literary novel, but I just really didn't enjoy it. I know other people liked it quite a lot, so it could win, but it definitely wouldn't be my winner enjoyment wise. Number 3 is Soldier Sailor, which I think is an impressive book, and I'm gonna say that I'm afraid this will win because so many people seem to love it. The originality for me wasn't quite there for it to be a winner. The writing was really good. I like the way that the unreliable narrator was used to create confusion within the reader, to create a certain literary atmosphere, I wanna say. But again, I could not with the character. She annoyed me so much, like dear lord. And I think the only 2 books that had characters that didn't annoy the shit out of me were my number 2 and my number 1. And my number 2 is River East and River West. I talked to you about that just a while back. I just really liked that book. It was such a good read. Very interesting topics, very original as well, very accessible. Excellent, kind of. Like I said, there were some things in the plot that I didn't feel were necessary. And then number 1, which is a glowing 5-star, and I think this one could very much also win, and that is Brotherless Night. If this one wins, then I love the Women's Prize even more, because last year my winner also won, so that would be so cool. Yeah, Brotherless Night is just an amazing novel. Everything about it is good. I could not give you a reason why this would not be a good read. It has everything. It has the characters, it has the plot, it has the writing, it has the imagery, it has a good political story without without being moralizing. It's educational in a way, not that a fiction book has to be educational. Basically, this book I would recommend to anyone who wants to read literary fiction. I have my 2 winners. I'm very curious to see who your winner is, and I'm also very curious to see what the actual winner is going to be. With the fiction list, I think Soldier Sailor might actually win, but last year I also thought that my winner wasn't the winner, and my winner was the winner. Overall, I have found some really good books, and no matter if they win or not, I read them and I enjoyed them and I had a great time with them. That is the most important thing. I've got to know a lot of new authors, which I kind of needed in the contemporary spheres. I needed some new authors to try out that are hopefully going to publish in the coming years. I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, let me know in a comment down below, and I hope to see you in another video.